As a collector who's lived many lives, maybe more than a cat, it's always a pleasure to speak to another collector who has evolved in taste and experience through the years. And today we're speaking to an advanced collector who has lived as many lives as I. This is Collector Conversations, Josh Polansky. Josh, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Tim. I appreciate it. Man, you're a monster with words, man. I love it. It's
well,
great.
I try to say as little as possible on this program. Let me know, what was your first exposure to a watch that caught your eye? Was it as a kid, adolescent, afterwards?
Yeah, going back, I know the first watch I was bought was a gift from my parents, but I think it goes before watches. The first memory I have of some kind of time machine, I would say, was my father was a harness racer. He raced horses. He had people race horses for him. And it wasn't a watch, but down in the basement he had like an Omega stopwatch, yeah. And I remember finding that as a kid and not knowing what it was, and I thought like I hit the jackpot, and I used to play with that thing all the time. So I think at a young age, this had to have been like one of my earliest memories, maybe 4 or 5, I'm not sure. But just having that control of time was like a funny thing for me. And ever since, I've just kind of been obsessed with watches, I would say. And obviously as a child, you can't afford watches. But as I grew older and where I am today, I'm a huge fan of watches.
I made that same journey. I think the first watch I had, my grandpa gave it to me. He bought it with box tops from cereal.
Nice.
He was that habitual, like, Cheerios guy.
Sure.
And so that was a little quartz multifunction. I had no idea how to use it. The oldest watch I got that I still have is a G-Shock that is now so corroded from workouts, my mom won't let me wear it in the house.
Sure.
So let me know, what was the first watch that entered the collection, stayed in the collection, and became the root of the collection?
Oh, yeah, I guess I'm gonna have to go with the watch that I'm wearing. Before this watch was many watches, I would say. But when you talk about the root of the collection, or if you talk about the directions I started going in, I'd have to say this Datejust. And we were talking earlier before the show started, and before I kept this Rolex as a watch collector, you go through a lot of pitfalls. You go through a lot of ups and downs. So I've bought watches, got burned on them, bought them on the internet, got burned, whatever. You're flipping them, selling them, eBay, the whole nine. And I remember I got into Panerai a lot. So that was the first like luxury watch that I purchased with my own hard-earned cash, and I loved it. And I went deep into the Panerai, the Paneristi forums and the circles. That's all I collected. I knew reference numbers. I had a 177, a 422. I had a submersible. I forget the number. It's 10, 12 years ago. But being in the Panerai camp, early on, before I even bought a Rolex, I kind of fell into the trap of like the I hate Rolex club. It was kind of almost cool to say, oh, Rolex sucks, I have a Panerai. You know, it was cool back then to like have an offshoot brand or be different. But as I was evolving, as I was getting older, I started respecting Rolex a lot more. Just for who they are. I mean, for the marketing they do, for the watches they make, and I guess I would say for the simplicity that they have. And that's kind of one of the biggest reasons I love Rolex today. But this watch in particular, it's kind of funny to go from a 44 millimeter Luminar to a 36 millimeter Datejust. But I wanted to get something, I guess I would say classic, something timeless, and something a little more mature. I do a lot of public speaking and I wear suits a lot for work. And the Panerai always felt clunky with a suit on. It always felt something was too big. So I wanted something a little more dressy, but sporty at the same time. Went with the Datejust. I wanted it to be a little different, so I went with the pink dial. I didn't want to have the typical Rolex Datejust that everyone goes into, but I think a lot of collectors on their journey go through the same thing. They get a 36 millimeter Datejust. This is the root of my collection, I would say, because it's the first watch that I kept. Meaning every watch before this left the collection at some point. I got bored very easily and I wanted something else. This watch actually left and it came to Gogberg. It was involved on a trade. I do a lot of trading because I always want to get a new watch. And it was involved on a Berthier oyster quartz that I got from you guys. And I traded this watch in for it. And the problem was the next day, literally, I was making coffee at my house, and next to my coffee machine is a picture of the day my wife and I got married. And right there in the picture was this watch on my wrist. And I remember like panicking, like, no, I need that watch back. So I called Josh over, he's in Hong Kong now, but Josh was my sales rep back then. And I was like, dude, get me that watch back. he got it back for me, and then this has stayed in my collection since. I wore it on the day I got married. I wear it to special occasions. That's why I'm wearing it today. This is the watch, even though it's, I don't wear it all the time, I would say it's one of my favorites. It's kind of like, if you asked me what my favorite band was, I might say Led Zeppelin. I don't listen to them every day, but if you put on the Rover or Achilles' Last Stand, it's the best music of all time, and that's kind of where I'm at with this watch right now.
Yeah, I can definitely see that, and I can relate to that sense of having a watch that's so closely tied to a life experience that it almost feels like a part of you is lost if you don't have the watch.
This was my first taste with that. Because before then, there was always that like Band-Aid effect, like, oh, I saw the Panerai, or like, oh, I saw the Vacheron, but a day later, it's away. This one, I felt something inside, like you have to get that back.
Every watch in my collection that I've ever kept, my first job Accutron, my college graduation Omega, Grandpa's watch, the JLC Vintage Memovox that I wear to all my Blue Oyster Cult concerts.
Oh, yeah, like the Blue Oyster Cult.
Those are the ones that stay forever. So
Sure.
let me know, what are the memories associated with these watches? Because you seem to have something that ties you to each one when we talked before the show.
Oh man, that's a tough question. I wouldn't even know where to begin.
Let's go with the Reverso.
Yeah, we can start with the Reverso. It's kind of your fault, the JLC craze, but no. I'll say this, we were talking earlier, and I always had this affinity towards the dress watches. I've always liked dress watches more, but if you look at my collection, or if you look at the watches I wear, I tend to wear more sporty watches because it fits my taste in clothing and my style, I guess, better than a dress watch. But I think that in a collection there should be a nice dress watch, and I like this watch, number one, because as you know, it's not a dress watch, it's like the original sports watch, I guess, with the Reverso case.
Yes.
Second, the reason I have this watch and the memory associated with it is this. I built a new building, a new dental lab. That's the business I'm in. And when I bought it, it was an incredibly stressful period of my life. Building something from the ground up, when it's just like a shell and you have to talk to contractors and codes, and you know, that's not who I am. I'm wearing a tee, this is not who I am. And I had to deal with it, and it was very hard. So I took out a loan, of course, and you know, when you're building a building and there's a little extra cash, you could always, let me go feel better. And
it took a couple of chances on the building and the watch.
Exactly. But I wanted a watch that kind of represented what I was trying to accomplish with my business, the feel of my business. When you walk into my business, I own a dental lab. And if you go into a typical dental lab, you won't see what you'll see if you walk into my dental lab. I wanted to make something like out of Paris, like something that looks like a real atelier. I think you pronounce it better than me. And what reminds me most of the feeling that I was going for with what I wanted my building to look like was this watch. It's a very elegant watch. It's a tribute to 1931. A lot of history behind it. Like I said earlier, I mean, it's a sports watch. That's super cool. And actually, coming from Panerai, coming from collecting Panerai, I always loved the manual wines. There was some kind of like tactile feel to it. The Panerais, I'm not so familiar with the movements of the Panerais, but they were a little like less, like this, when I wind it, I hear it, I feel it. I mean, I've had Vacherons in the past, the Patrimony. When I wound that thing, even though you couldn't see the movement, you knew it was a Geneva seal because you feel it.
And that's the part of the experience of the watch. Little things, we get so caught up in the feel of a bezel, the feel of a winding click, the feel of a chronograph pusher. It's essential, and
love it.
The Reverso aces that. As a manual wind watch, it must feel good when you wind. Take me to the other extreme. Now you have high horology. I mean, you have Patek, you have Audemars Piguet, you have Jaeger-LeCoultre, but you also have Swatch. And I'd love to hear, when the pendulum swings to the other side of the hobby, how did this watch capture your heart? How did this happen?
Yeah, this watch is awesome. The reason it captured my heart was first and foremost is I always wanted like a murked out, like a blacked out watch. But I always try to stay away, and this is something that happens over the years of collecting. You kind of understand the pitfalls. And I've realized long ago to kind of stay away from fads or trends. And I always thought like the all black, the DLC, the all blacked out watches, I don't know if I would get sick of it, because it's not like an everyday wear. But this watch, for the price point, all blacked out. If you're a watch guy, you know what the System 51 is, a fully automated automatic watch. Again, relating it to what I do as a business. I started off in my field doing everything, making teeth by hand. Today, I have a lot of automation in my lab. I have a lot of similar machines that make teeth, but in this case, it's the same machines making a watch. So there's a strong tie for this watch, and it's just fun. I don't know, it's just, I wear it on vacation, I can beat it up, I can wear it around. The only thing is, correct me if I'm wrong, I just don't think it can be serviced.
Now, it can't be serviced, but the good news is I've got one that's now 3 years to the good, so it may not need to be serviced.
You know, it doesn't have to be a Patek, it doesn't have to be an FP Journe. I mean, if you love watches, you can get in on any price point, and like you just said, I mean, anybody can wear this watch. And the cool thing is, if you're a watch guy, you know exactly what it is. So I really like that about this watch, and the interesting movement on the back there.
And the fun thing about that watch is watch guys really know it and respect it. You could wear a Rolex and, you know, it's the kind of thing that catches the eye of the gen pop. The people who notice it might not be into watches. Someone flags you down to talk System 51, that guy's got mechanical watches, that guy's got vintage watches, that guy's got high horology. It's the funniest thing on earth, but it's like, it's a secret handshake watch and a sort of gateway to friendship.
Yeah, this is a really cool thing about collecting. And so collecting, I would say it's almost an isolated or a lonely sport, I would say, because you're in your house, you have your little box and you lay them out on a table, and, well, at least that's what I do. But what you just said is also pretty cool because it's that friendship or the handshake thing, and I guess it's a good segue into another watch that I love. And going from, I guess, one extreme to the other, I would pick up the 15400, the Audemars. This watch was really cool because it really, for me, exemplified, first of all, it was my first, I would consider, high horology watch. Seeing the finishing on this for the first time, for me, was like ridiculous. Especially when I was driving home with it and the sun was hitting the bracelet, I was just like, wow. And at the time, a 5711 was still, I would say affordable, meaning like it was still a lot more than this, but it was still in my price range. Today, it's way out of my price range. And I could have gotten one pre-owned, and I went with the 15400. First, just because it was Genta's first design. Second, for me personally, and I hope I don't get slammed in the comments, it's just more interesting for me. The bracelet is cool. This watch is more interesting and unique to me. I was in Texas with a client of mine, Chad Perry's a doctor in Fort Worth, Texas, and we were at a barbecue place, and I went to get some fixings to put it on my barbecue, and I was next to my client Chad, and this guy just grabbed my arm from out of nowhere. And you know, we're from Philadelphia, you're from Philadelphia right now.
Yeah, that usually doesn't precede, hey, how are you?
Exactly. But the arm that grabbed me, right when I looked down to have my instinct jerk reaction, I just saw a hook on that arm. So I was saying, okay, this guy's coming in a peaceful manner. And there was a guy saying, hey man, nice watch. And then I looked at his watch and said, yeah, nice watch. And we sat there for about 20 minutes at a barbecue concession stand talking about watches. He never saw one in the person. I took mine off, gave it to a complete stranger. He took his off, and it was cool. But then the next morning, Dr. Perry, the doctor I work with, said to me, he goes, you know, my wife and I were talking last night. What's the deal? What was the deal yesterday with those watches? And then I had to explain it to him, and he didn't get it. But then a month later, he said, hey, man, I was watching this show called Billions, and I saw a Patek. What's it? So it opened up this dialogue, which I really liked. So this watch, number one, was my first Grail watch. But it was the first watch that someone in public kind of like, hey, man, like, you're on my team. You're on my side.
Yeah.
And it was cool.
The thing that always strikes me when I see someone with a 15400, a 15202, a 15300, how did you choose the dial color? Because that's always emotional.
It's a hard one. So, funny story about this watch. It was a Grail watch of mine forever. I follow a Watchbox. At the time it was Gobberg, but I follow the online inventory of pre-owned almost religiously every day. These were, if they came in, they would move. It was like if they came in, they moved. I was dead set on a black dial, dead set. So I saw one pop up, called them up. They said, we're gonna hold it, blah, blah, blah. I shot over the bridge. I left directly from work, got here, tried it on. I said, sold, done, cash was in pocket. And a girl came out of the back and said, is your name, I forgot the name, it might have been Bob, I'm not sure. And I said, no, it's Josh. And she goes, ooh, we don't know how to tell you this, but this watch is sold. And Josh saw me kind of like melt, like, no, like, yeah, it's sold, it's to me, like, I'm gonna buy it right now. But they had to honor the person, I guess, put a credit card down, it was sold. So that day, Josh saw I was heartbroken. I had the bug, I had to buy something. I bought a master calendar that day because I was not leaving without something. And Josh was like, I'll give you such a deal, like you have no idea. So he basically gave me a JLC to calm me down.
Good deal.
It was a good deal. That JLC is long gone as well because, again, I always wanted the Royal Oak. So then I was coming in on a whim and I was talking to Josh. He said, listen, I feel bad about what happened with that. I can get you a new Royal Oak and I can get you a very good price. Now you just choose the color. I thought I was dead set on black, But there was something more unique about this because I wore it outside and saw it in the light, and the black kind of was a little more plain to me. So I went with this, and you're right, it was a very hard decision. These aren't things like t-shirts, they're very expensive, and it's a difficult decision to make. Went with the white, and I'm so glad I did. Number one, because it's discontinued now, and the black I still think they make in the 15.
Yeah, now they're rolling over the 15500. It's a whole new generation of watch.
Correct. So, here we have the discontinued dial, we have the 3120 movements also discontinued, so I'm glad I went with this watch. One of my grails, still one of my favorites, unbelievable.
So we go from high horology to sort of a middle-of-the-market, entry-level luxury and more of a tactical pro look. We've got two on NATOs here. Tell me about your field watch and your moon watch.
Sure.
Let's go with the moon watch
Start
first.
with the moon watch first. So, okay, I'm here on a show about collecting watches. There's got to be a Speedmaster. It's been said by everyone, you have to have a Speedmaster and blah, blah, blah. Was never a huge fan of Omega. I just kept seeing them online, pre-moons, moon watches. I kept seeing them over and over. Every collector I've seen online, and this is the cool thing about a Speedmaster. I mean, I've seen these sit in collections with basic watches, entry-level watches. I've seen them sit in collections with Richard Mille's. I mean, this always has a seat at the dinner table, and I understand the reason why now that I own it. Didn't break the bank, but it's such a versatile watch. I love this version of it. It has the Hesalite on it, and until you have that domed bezel outdoors in the sunlight, until you feel this watch on, it just looks, it has the vintage look, I would say, without being a vintage watch. I threw it on the NATO because these are two watches I travel a lot with. I love that I can time things with this. And yeah, it's just an overall great watch. This probably will never leave my collection. I also love this watch because I'm a huge collector of, I was a huge collector of Panerai. This has become, I guess, my Panerai. So I keep it on a NATO because it's very easy to switch out.
And this is an Omega factory NATO too.
Yeah, this
That's
came
nice
with
piece.
the set. Yeah, so it's very easy to switch these out. I cut my nails for the show, but it's very easy to pop this spring bar off. And they make the easy, I don't know the name for them, but
Oh yeah, the pull tab spring bar.
yeah, so you can load these on. So that's another thing that I was doing earlier in my watch collecting career. Before I could afford multiple watches, it was always great to get a different strap because you could have multiple watches for very cheap. And these are expensive pieces of, I guess, machinery. So it's always good to cheaply get a new watch.
Oh, yeah. And I agree with you about how the Panerai scene, not just for those who are in it, but for the whole industry, it kind of changed everyone's attitude towards straps. All of a sudden,
Oh, it was awesome.
it became a subculture within a subculture, the strap swapping.
It was awesome. So that was my thing, and that's why I love Panerais. Like I said, you bought one watch that was pretty expensive, and this is like 10, 12 years ago. That wiped me out for like a couple years. So in that interim, to get an itch, to spend a couple $100 to get a new strap, and they had the gunny straps, they had all these it was very like manly watch. I mean, it just was like and
Quasi-tactical.
Yeah, it was like crazy, and I was into all that stuff. And yeah, that was cool. So talking about quasi-tactical, this field watch is great. I bought this. It wasn't an expensive watch, but again, it's a manual wind. Both of these are manual wind, and again, that tactile feeling is great to interact with your watch. But I bought this watch, believe it or not, for one sole purpose only. This is my travel watch.
Yes.
So I travel a lot to Europe and overseas. And I actually have almost missed planes because on the tickets overseas, they put military time. So 1742, 18. And even though I have an iPhone and all that, I can't do it so fast. So I wear this when I travel, just so when I hop off the plane, if I have to board another flight, if there's a layover, I can just take a quick glance, see the military time, know what time I'm flying, and go from there. And it looks cool. It's a great beater watch, and
It's got a very true 1940s standard issue type look to it. And this is a wonderful piece that anyone could enjoy. This doesn't have to be a first luxury watch. This could be in a collection alongside, it could be in a collection alongside a Patek Philippe Aquanaut.
yeah, it sure can.
Maybe we could talk about that Aquanaut. You've got the 5167.
Sure. So, I guess as a collector, starting with Panerai, going to Rolex, going to JLC, there's one name that's going to come up inevitably in every watch collecting conversation, and that's Patek. I felt in the beginning of my collection, my collecting years, that I was almost being forced to like Pateks. because people were telling me Patek, Patek, Patek. Oh, you collect watches? You need a Patek. Oh, like Patek, Patek. I don't want to say this, but I never really had an affinity towards Patek. Of course, the 5711 was nice, but as I just told you, I had a chance to buy a 5711, and my heart went with
the Royal Oak.
Yeah, so I was never a huge fan of Patek because it was a little too dressy for me, I'll say. My character, my style, my taste in clothes, it never really fit. You know, you can't tell from this interview, but I'm a t-shirt and jeans guy. I wear Chuck Taylors. You know, I'm very laid back. What am I going to get, a hobnail Calatrava? It's just not going to fit with me. So on my 10th anniversary of my business, I wanted to buy myself something from Milestone. So it's like opening Pandora's box. What watch am I going to buy? I'm going to divest some of my collection because I had a messy or an unfocused collection at one point, but I had some pieces with some weight to them I can get some good dollars for. So I said, I'm going to divest my collection, and I want to get one watch. What watch am I going to get? Throughout the FB Journes, throughout all these classic watches. And I kept coming back to an Aquanaut. I never tried one on in person, I never saw one, but it always looked cool in the pictures. And I tried on an Aquanaut. I was here one day, and I was actually looking at another watch. I won't even tell you what watch it was. But Claudia said, hey, listen, Josh, I got a 5167 in the back, 5 months old, basically brand new. We all know today that these are hard to get. Took a look at it, sat there with my wife. My wife left. She was like literally, because I was just sitting here for literally almost an hour staring at it. I know how the pre-owned market runs. I know if I leave, it's going to be gone. So I know, okay, I have to make this decision today. I went ahead and pulled the trigger. I've never looked back, and I'm so glad that I did. It just so happens, coincidentally, you know, this is my 10th year present to myself, but this coincidentally is the 10th year revamp of the Aquanaut. I believe it was, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, the 5167, exactly, back in 2007.
Correct. So this was their 10-year anniversary to something that I think is so cool, because this for me is a Patek that I like. It's not the stuffy suit and tie Patek. This is like just casual. I think John Mayer just said it on a show. It's like the Chuck Taylor of Pateks, and it's just very cool. I can wear this anywhere. It's so under the radar. It's definitely, if you know type watch. They thought of everything. I just think it's so cool too, because it's Genta designed this. Genta designed the 5711. Patek actually sat down in a room, I felt, and it has some DNA of a Genta watch with the octagon shape, I guess, but the details, again, once you have this, of like, this has an integrated bracelet, for instance, but I've never seen an integrated, I guess, bezel to...
That sort of geosphere cut to the dial that continues in the strap.
Correct, and the strap itself, for me, is the coolest thing about this watch. I've had friends who have asked me how much does that watch cost, and I've told them, and they freaked out because it's on a rubber strap. And for me, kind of with like an FU attitude towards authority sometimes, I'm sorry to say, I love this. I love that Patek put a rubber strap on here that I had to, after spending a lot of money, had to take a scissors and frantically, meticulously cut it one by one until you get it just right. I love that about this watch. For me, it's like a group sat in a room and said, we have to design the ultimate sports watch, and I think that that's what they came up with. I love it. I mean, for me, I love this watch. For me, it's my favorite. Been wearing it the most. Very underrated. Same 320, what is it, 324 SE movement, same as the
same as the Nautilus, yeah.
I'm sorry.
So this is a little bit of a rebellious watch, and I think it suits your character and it suits your personality. Is this the watch that gets the most wrist time?
Right now, it's for sure. It's the newest watch that I've purchased. But I have a strong feeling that it will be the #1 watch for a while. The rubber strap, so I have other rubber strap watches, and again, because they thought of every detail. To make a rubber strap, for me, this is the only way. The tails on the rubber straps, on all the other ones I had, they get stuck when you take your shirt off, so the details on this are just ridiculous. Right now, it's getting the most wrist time. Again, like you said, I mean, I'm a rebellious person at heart, and I think it's so cool to have a company like Patek, who I always saw as the opposite, make something like this that's so just like, again, just like the Royal Oak shocked the industry back then as a huge brick. This, I think, shocked a lot of people. I think it even shocked a lot of like diehard Patek fans. They were kind of like, what, a Patek on a rubber strap? But that's kind of, I guess, my take on what I'd want a watch and a company to be, is a rebellious company.
So let me ask you a question now that we know the watch that gets the most wrist time. I've sort of found a theme through your collection. You've got your no-date sub, also known as the Submariner, because technically the Submariner with the date is called the Submariner date.
Exactly.
You've got your Royal Oak. You've got a Omega Moon watch. You have a Reverso tribute to 1931. It seems like you own a lot of core models from their respective brands.
Correct. It's a good observation. And I almost felt, I don't want to say embarrassed, but as a collector, I feel sometimes my collection is a little like obvious, or of course. There's the Sub, there's the Datejust, there's the Patek. It's a lot of like flagship models. So I can say this, and it's only from experience that I say this, but I've bought a lot more watches that are on this table, and I've made a lot of mistakes, and I've gotten beat up pretty bad over the years. Beat up meaning like my tastes have changed, and I wanted to divest or get rid of the watches, and then I was thinking in my mind, kind of like, oh, well, I paid this much for it, I'll get this much. And then I got the offer, and I'm like, excuse me? So I realized that there's certain watches that will always hold value, and I would like to acquire watches that definitely, number one, hold value in case I ever would like, in case I get bored of them. And it's only, you know, some people I always hear like, just buy the watch that you love. I've bought and watches in the past that I loved, but then I fall out of love with them. So I always want to have some kind of back door. With this, always a back door. Always a back door.
Of course.
Always a back door. Sometimes.
That's a core.
Yeah.
Someone always is looking for a steel Reverso 1931.
Correct. But I do. But you hit the nail on the head. I like. I said this earlier, but I love the look of a dress watch. But I tend more towards the sporty side. So it's not just core models, but it's, I guess, sportier models, things that I can kind of wear anywhere, and things that if I ever get sick of, and also, you know, they're core models, Tim, for a reason, and I think one of the reasons is because they're timeless. So for instance, we've talked about the Sub. It's timeless. I mean, a 114060, today it has a ceramics, a super case, but essentially it looks very similar.
Yeah, that could be the 1953 charter owner of the Sub family would recognize that as a Sub.
Correct, and that's what I love about this watch, and I think we can talk about this watch too.
Yeah, definitely. What's the story behind it?
The story behind this is another good one. So buying watches, like I said, they're expensive. I'm not so great with my money sometimes, and I should be spending them on other things. So sometimes with what I do professionally, I can work things. So there was a patient who found me on the internet. They wanted to get their teeth done by me, so they came here from out of state. My father was a dentist. He just retired recently. And because the patient came to me, the tables were kind of turned. Usually the dentist gets the money and then I get subcontracted to make the teeth. But in this case, I said, hey, you know, I found the patient. I should be getting a little more than I usually get. So I made a deal. My father never bought me a watch, but I always wanted to get something from my dad, so I kind of made him buy me this watch. I said, listen, I'll make the case. You can have the patient, but don't pay my business. I want a Sub.
It's like a finder's fee.
Correct, exactly. So this reminds me a lot, I guess, the skill I possess. It was kind of a trade to do the work I do to get this watch, but it also will never leave my collection because it was the connection that I had working with my father that allowed me to get this watch. So a special connection to this. I started out hating Rolexes, like I said, and then I got the Datejust, and then I got this, and this watch really made me fall in love with Rolex.
And it's kind of interesting that when you spend luxury dollars on a watch, you tend to go with core collection, icons, milestones. But when you're looking at wackier watches, you tend to, let's say, put fewer eggs in the basket. Let's talk about some of the wackier watches you've got on the table. Let's start with the Eastern Bloc.
Sure. So we were talking about this earlier, and I wasn't going to bring it, but I'm glad I did because I saw it sparked an interest in you. This watch brings up a nice memory for me. Like I said, I travel a lot, and I was in Krakow in Poland, and during some downtime, you've probably heard this on many shows about collecting watches. Wherever I'm at, I go on Google and I look for what watch shops they have. It's a hobby I have. I really like seeing watches. And I was just walking, and I walked by this like antique store, and I saw these in the window. And I walked in. I mean, it looked very expensive to me. I had no idea what it was. I thought they would say something in the €1,000 range, but they told me it was like €200. And I remember saying like, bag it up, right now, done. You know, done. I threw it on a credit card, wore it home, and this was my dress watch for a long time. And I have to say, out of all these watches on the table, it's my wife's favorite watch. And a lot of people, when I wear it, I get a lot of compliments on this watch. for an old vintage watch, this watch has a lot of charm, it has a lot of pizzazz, it has a lot of spirit to it. And it's just a really cool, quirky watch. Love the case design of it, love the hands on it. It's just a very cool watch.
It's interesting because this watch was made by the predecessor company of today's Glashütte Original.
Correct.
This was made by the old GUB. And you can see it says GUB, the old Glashütte Uhrenbetriebe on the back. It still bears the mark on every modern Glashütte Original movement. It says GUB and then the caliber number. And this watch right here featured one of the last GUB calibers, the Spezematic. This was the gateway to the modern Glashütte Original luxury watch era. This was what they had after the fall of the wall and the fall of communism. And you know, from these modest beginnings, this movement propelled them to high luxury. So that's a wonderful historical document, as well as a very unique watch. Now we have a watch that is very much of our era and maybe a bit heretical in its own right. Could you please tell us the story behind this Invicta Smurf?
Yeah, sure. So this watch sits here for one reason. I don't know much about Invicta. Of course, as a watch collector, I've always heard it bashed. I've always heard it kind of thrown under the bus online and all that. This is actually the newest watch that has come into my collection or my possession, and it was a gift, and that's why it's in my collection, and that's why it also holds some importance to me. This watch is a reminder to me that it's just watch collecting, and although these things cost a lot of money and some people use them as material goods, it reminded me to not take this hobby so seriously, and to not be pretentious. So I speak a lot, like I said, and there's, I guess, a lot of people. I'm their mentor, so I guess they'd be my mentee, I'm not sure. But there's a guy who makes teeth. He does what I do. He's a dental technician, and he really looks up to me. He follows me, and we have, in the dental world, we have our Basel and our SIHH every year, and it's called the Midwinter in Chicago, and it's a huge fair, just like watch collecting. And I speak at them every year, and he comes every year. And this year, he came, and I saw a Smurf peeking through his thing, and I thought it was a Rolex Blueberry. I mean, I literally looked at it, and because I caught myself being pretentious, thinking like everyone's into watches and everyone has these nice watches. So I said to him, I say, hey Edwin, man, nice watch. And then he rolled the sleeve back and I saw Invicta, and I caught myself saying like, oh geez, you know, like that. And after I spoke and I lectured, I was wearing I guess they're called like a lanyard, like a name tag.
Sure.
You know? And he asked me, can I have your name tag? And for me, it's not a big deal. I said, of course. I said, let me finish the show up, meet me back here. I'm gonna fly out today, I'll give it to you when I leave. I just wanna have entrance and blah, blah, blah. So the second I told him to meet me there, he was there. And I gave him my name tag and he shook my hand. And in his hand was this watch. And I took it and I remember saying, nah, dude, like no way, I can't take your watch. And he insisted I took it. And if you look at this watch, I don't know if you can see it on the screen. I mean, this thing's been beaten to hell. And the reason why I like this watch is that I don't know him, I don't know his background, I don't know what his dreams are, I don't know what his goals are, but I've inspired him to do something. And in return, he gave me something that he definitely held, I guess, true to something he liked. And it was the first gift watch I ever got. And that was nice to have somebody give me that, and I wish him the best. And I mean, I hope the things I've taught him can one day, if this is his thing, to be able to purchase these things, whatever it may be. But number two, it's also cool because this was a huge part of his life. And I think what sometimes we do as watch collectors is that I'm like, he gave me an Invicta, boom, like this. But that night, I remember I had some hitters in the bag. I had, when I go to these shows, of course, I want to flex a little bit. I had a Patek and I had a 15400. And that night, out to the bar and out to the dinner, I wore an Invicta, you know?
Yeah.
Just to kind of show some appreciation for my gift. And you know, no one was looking. No one was judging me. Sometimes we're in this world where like everyone's looking at, no one cares. And that's what it taught me, is to not be so pretentious. Don't take watches so seriously. It's just a hobby. They could all be gone tomorrow. And his name was Edwin, man, and I really appreciate his gift to me. And I don't wear it so often, but it's kind of like my date just. It'll hold a home in my collection. And it doesn't matter if it's an Invicta or a Patek or a Swatch. If you love watches, you just gotta love watches.